This still turned on?
That should be okay.
How many of you ever sought counsel before? I mean, like a lawyer. All right? But I mean, if you had to, I guess. It's not a bad idea. But, asking someone for advice, right? I want you to know that in the Bible, there's an interesting time. There's a time in which we find some kings. There's a time in which we find some kings that, honestly, they wanted to get some advice, and they didn't do a really good job at the advice that they got. And so tonight we'll be in 2 Chronicles chapter 10. We're going to find this advice that was not very well thought out. And I want to share this with you because in your life, in our lives, there's times in which we need good advice. We need good counsel in our lives. As churches, we need good counsel in our lives. I want you to see here what happens here as we have the stage is set here with Rehoboam. And it says again, it's in 2 Chronicles chapter 10, starting in verse 1. It says, and Rehoboam went to Shechem, for all Israel had gone to Shechem to make him king. So it happened, when Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, heard it, he was in Egypt, for he had fled from the presence of King Solomon. Then Jeroboam returned from Egypt. Then they sent for him and called him. And Jeroboam and all Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, saying, your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the burdensome service of your father and his heavy yoke, which he put on us, and we will serve you. So he said to them, come back to me after 3 days. And the people departed. Then King Rehoboam consulted with the elders who stood before his father Solomon, while he still lived, saying, how do you advise me to answer these people? And they spoke to him, saying, if you are kind to these people, then please them and speak good words to them. They will be your servants forever. But he rejected the advice which the elders had given him, and consulted the young men who grew up with him, who stood before him. And he said to them, what advice do you give? How should we answer this people who have spoken to me, saying, lighten the yoke which your father put on us? Then the young men who had grown up with him spoke to him, saying, thus you should speak to the people who have spoken to you, saying, your father made your yoke heavy, our yoke heavy, but you made it lighter on us. Thus you shall say to them, my little finger shall be thicker than my father's waist. And now whereas my father put a heavy yoke on you, I will add to your yoke. My father chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scourges. So Jeroboam and all the people came to Rehoboam on the 3rd day, as the king had directed, saying, come back to me the 3rd day. Then the king answered them roughly. King Rehoboam rejected the advice of the elders, and he spoke to them according to the advice of the young men, saying, my father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to it. My father chastened you with whips, but I will chasten you with scourges. So the king did not listen to the people, for the turn of events was from God, that the Lord might fulfill his word which was spoken by the hand of Ahijah the Shilonite to Jeroboam the son of Nebat. It's very interesting that Israel screamed out for a king. And their lame excuse was they wanted to be just like everybody else around them. And that was the excuse, that was their argument that they gave before God. That we want to be like everybody else. My mom and dad used to say that was keeping up with the Joneses. You want to keep up with everybody else around you. That's exactly what Israel did. They told God that, hey, this is what we want. And what did God do? He gave it to them, didn't he? So we find that Israel had King Solomon, King David, King Saul, King David, King Solomon, and then it all went apart from there. And here we see some interesting counsel being taken. Have you always given good advice to someone? Have you always received good advice from someone? So as we see here that there is absolutely nothing wrong with getting advice, but we must make sure that we understand something that's very important. That advice must be biblically sound as we receive it. I had this person come to me not too long ago, and I told them that every single time we come together, I'm going to ask you the same question. And that is this: what is your relationship with God? Because you see, if you and I don't have a relationship with God, our problems can never be fixed properly. Well, they might temporarily have some reprieve given to us, but they'll come back. And here we see this situation taking place. Here we see that Rehoboam had a decision to make, a royal decision to make as a leader of this country. And what he did was, the first thing he did was he went out there and we see him go to the elders of the community. We go and we see him try to get some advice, or at least on the surface get some advice from them. And as he did so, I'm not quite convinced how much he listened. I'm not quite sure if he just really did so just to be polite. But I'm not convinced he ever had any intention of listening to them. And we see here that as this takes place, that we know that the Bible tells us in Proverbs chapter 20, verse 18, that it is a good thing that the plans are established by counsel, by wise counsel. So here we see some counsel being given by the older and by the younger. Now let's face it, I can't be too hard on him because most of the time older people won't listen to younger people. Did you know that? I'm just throwing that out there. And it's not so much that it's in here we see this taking place and we see he's not going to listen to the older people, I'm going to listen to the younger people. And what did it do? Made a mess. Okay? And I want us to see some things here. Let's talk about when you and I reach out and we need some help. And I want us to think about this for a moment. In church, and I want us to take what these passages have and let's apply them to the church. Okay? Apply them to our lives and then apply them to the church. Because it's really important that we understand something, that we cannot settle for settling. Okay? We can't simply say if nobody else will do the project, nobody else will serve in this committee, or nobody else will serve on this team, then I'll just do it because nobody else will. We should never settle for that. And I want you to know here, I want us to see what we can learn from this behavior of these leaders. This behavior that was destructive, this behavior that ultimately led to the kingdom of Israel being split in half. So we can see this taking place. First, I want us to see here that we need to ask ourselves some questions. We need to ask ourselves questions when we put our teams and committees together in the church. We need to ask ourselves questions when we do so because it's important. Because every decision that they are given should be held as important in the church. Because of making that decision is something that we give that committee to do we not? If we refuse to let committees make their decision, then there's absolutely no reason to have one. We don't let them serve out their time, then there's no reason to have one. So it's really important that when we put a team together, we put a committee together, that they understand and we understand what it's all about. We need to understand this and see because it's important. And it begins this way. First and foremost, we need to ask ourselves, are they people who tell us what we want to hear? You guys ever been around people that they just tell you what you want to hear? Because it makes you feel good, doesn't it? Really what we call them is yes men. Okay? We call them yes men. And we as a church, we need to make sure we understand that we can sometimes we need to have the truth given to us so we can make things better. So that we can do things better. And you see, this is really what this is all about. Do you think here that as the king was, if he just would have simply listened to both groups of people a little bit better, and maybe his response to them would have been differently? I think it would have been. Sometimes you have to give a little. Sometimes you got to take a little. And sometimes then you have to be able to blend those together. But he didn't want to do that, did he? In fact, what he wanted to do was make the people's lives what? Miserable. And that's really what he wanted to do. He said, I'll make mine. If you notice what he said there, he said, you know what? Very simply, he said there, my father made your yoke heavy, but I will add to it I will do so. I will add to it over and over again. So as we want us to understand is that let us make sure that when we do things in the church, when we put our teams together, we put our committees together, that it's not simply so they're always going yes. And that we understand that and make sure they understand they have a vital responsibility to us and to the church, because that's what it's about. You see, he didn't care about that, did he? He didn't care about that whatsoever. There's something else we need to understand here that is very important, is that when we put people together in your life, in my life, in the life of our church, and when we do things in the church, are the people we're placing in positions in the church, do they have a reputation of integrity? Okay? I want you to notice something here. Here we see them. We see them, it says, come back in 3 days. Verse 6 there tells us here that he went, at least it appears that he went to those of integrity. Now remember, just because someone's older doesn't mean they have any integrity about them. All right? But in theory, there should be. Okay? There should be more life experiences. There should be more reverent respect for God and so forth. But that doesn't always mean that it's going to be there. It doesn't always mean it's not going to be there if someone's younger either. But here we see in this case a complete disrespect for what those when Rehoboam consulted with those that had what? Worked with his father. Did he get a pretty good father? He was pretty good. He had his problems. Okay, he liked ladies. He liked foreign gods that led him down the road of path to where he got himself into trouble. He was a smart man. But you see, here we see him looking at the same people who counseled his father, and basically he was almost giving them lip service. See, we need to make sure that as we go through this as people, as God's people, we need to make sure that we do this the right way. Let us make sure we're following God and trusting God. The third thing I want us to see here tonight is this. Are the people... This is why it's really important when I said that we should never put together teams and committees in our church simply because nobody else will do it. Are the people we're going to place in the leadership roles in the church, are they going to have, do they have a track record of making wise decisions? I'm going to guess that these individuals that were being talked to, the younger individuals, probably had no idea how to make a decision ever. They probably never had to think that hard in their life. That they were probably spoiled rotten. Okay? So as we see this here, we can see them saying, hey, let's do this to those people that used to serve before your dad. We'll show them. Did Solomon make some great strides? Sure. Did Solomon build a temple? Yeah. Did he make a beautiful temple? Absolutely. Of course, we're not going to see an earth. We're not going to see that temple. Did Solomon have peace? Sure he did. Was Solomon wise above everyone else? But here we see that he put these people, he's talking to these younger people here, and he's talking to them, and they are ones who did not have a very good history, very good track record of doing the right things in their life. It's not a good idea to hire a bank robber to guard the bank, is it? Probably not a good idea. Probably not a good idea to have my dog watch over your steak on the cabinet top. You see, but we do that all the time in our lives. We're not careful. By not allowing the proper advice to come into our lives. In our churches. Why do our churches get into so much trouble? Why do churches have to fight over whether abortion is proper or not? Why do churches have to put in their constitution that we're not going to recognize the marriage unless between a man and a woman? Because we take advice from the world. And we try to make people happy. We try to be politically correct. Political correctness is part of what's destroying our country. Sin is what ultimately is doing so. But here we see the king, the one with the ultimate power, the one who could have said, hey, let's blend this advice together. I was told that a king is one who probably wants the people that he rules over to like him, to want to serve him. If you want to get a product done, how many of you guys were ever the boss at GM? I promise you, you probably had to be a fair boss, because if you weren't, it's going to be a lot harder to get the work done out of those that you're over the top of. You have to learn to give and take. And here we see him not willing to, I'm going to listen to one group of people. We ever do that in our lives? I'm really going to talk to two people that, it's kind of like in football. They have something called the Rooney Rule. And if I understand that correctly, that basically means that every single football team has to at least make an effort to to interview a minority candidate for a position in their organization. I've often thought that's kind of interesting, because how sincere is anybody when they're forced to have to do something? And here we see he was really forced to make a decision. He was not sincere at all with this conversation with the older people. He wasn't sincere. He never intended on it. I don't think he ever intended on it, because when we were reading through here, we don't see him ever sitting down and going, well, they weren't right about that. It makes sense. Or no, they don't know what they're talking about. But they didn't really know what my dad thought about them when they were in front of him. See, we don't see it in his conversation and in his thought process by which he had as he was going to make this decision. I want all of us, I want us as individuals, I want us as a church to make sure that we seek out wise counsel so that we can have those decisions that are made can be good ones. Not in direct. Made along reasons why there's so many different churches. But Brother Rick wouldn't agree sometimes that some people just didn't get along with one another. They decided, we'll just go start our own church. Pretty close. Am I pretty accurate? That's pretty close. You see, the church used to be, when it first started, it was the center of everything. When you went out to these smaller communities, and probably right here in Indianapolis when it started, because it didn't start out as big as it is now. The church was important. The church was the center of everything. They had their government meetings there. They had their school board meetings there. I mean, they had everything that was there. I had this guy one time, I was listening to the radio when we were living in Wyoming. He called the local radio stations. I cannot believe that we have to vote in a church. That church was the church I was a pastor of. And I called the radio station because the guy was irate that the government would use a church to vote in. And I can remember the conversation that I had with the radio host, and I told him the whole idea was not to force religion down anyone's activities that might need to be used. And he said, so you guys forced everybody then to listen to the Bible when they came in. You forced them then to go to church. He was being sarcastic, of course. You see, people get so mixed up about church. I have to go down to the Lutheran church over here. I don't throw a fit about it. I don't like the fact that pollsters sit there with their signs in my face when I walk in the door, but that's another point for another day. But you see, we need to remember as a church, let us make sure we put wise decisions into practice by putting wise people into positions that can help make that happen. Not just to fill a position, not just because we think this person's nice and this person isn't, but to make sure that they do so. One of my biggest pet peeves is that we have to make sure we have enough diversity in our working place now. Have you ever noticed that? It's not about whether someone's qualified anymore. I want you guys to know that. And you see, that carries over into the church. It's not whether or not somebody's qualified. It's because we like them better than somebody else. I literally had a deacon say to me one time, I wasn't here, say that I think I'm only a deacon because of popularity contest. You see, we have to make sure that we put leaders in a position in the church, that they are ones who we can trust, those who are going to make right decisions for the church. And now, let's make no mistake, we're not just talking about a pastor or a deacon, we're talking about anyone who serves in leadership role in the church. Because it's that important for the integrity of the church, for when we make those decisions that have to take place. Now, something else with that, something else that we need to make sure we're very, very aware of and working towards, actually, when we get together next month, you'll see what I'm talking about. But we need to make sure when we put those in leadership roles in the church that they're in it for the long haul. Not just short-term fix for something, but for the long haul. That they truly want to make a difference in the church and through the church into the community. It's easy to go, man, that person just came into the church and they're excited about being in church and we need to put them in a leadership role immediately. I've learned over the years that can be very dangerous. And you see here, we see these, do you think these younger people are in for the long haul? Probably not. How about the older people? Probably. But you see, the long haul can only be there if what? We stick around long enough for it to happen. So as we see here with this decision that he's going to make, was it a good decision? Was it a wise decision? Well, it depends which side of the fence you sat on. Depends if you were one of the older ones who sat under Solomon, or one of the youngers who were friends with his kids. It just totally depends where you were at. But as we see this decision that he's going to make, ultimately it leads the complete separation of Israel into a northern kingdom and a southern kingdom, or as we know it, Judah and Israel. It didn't take them very long because they couldn't agree. And we as Christians, we need to make sure, I want every one of us to make sure we understand as a church, are we in it for the long haul? I hope so. I hope as Christians we're in it for the long haul. I hope that as leaders in our church that you're in it for the long haul. And that we put people in positions who we can trust. And we can put people in positions by which we don't have to worry but they're going to do the right thing because we already know, because they've shown that they have done so in their life. These young people probably did. Now, I'm not trying to knock any young people, because I think young people, because I'm going to tell you what, it can be very dangerous for the older people to say, young people, we don't need you. In fact, it can be just as destructive. I was once told, you're too young for that job. How can I fix that? I got to get older. See, we have to be very careful both ways as Christians. Because if we're not, it'll be just like Rehoboam and Jeroboam, and you'll have the northern kingdom and you'll have the southern kingdom. So as we think about this as Christians, as you think about your life, as we think about moving forward as God's people, as God's church, what are we willing to do? Are we willing to say, you know what? We're going to trust God with those people we put in positions. We're going to trust Him. And we as a church trust Him. When we lived in Alaska, Frank Murkowski was the senator from Alaska, and one of the senators, and he ultimately ran for governor. He became the governor of Alaska. And do you know who he appointed to his position in Washington, D.C.? His daughter. We have heard of her before. Her name is Lisa Murkowski. And by the way, she hasn't turned out to be the greatest person in the world. But you see, he wasn't real careful in his decision making. That's what we need to be very careful in decisions making that we do, based upon what does the Scripture say. And that's the last thing I want to share with you. This, guys, if we answer a question that's always how we've done it, that's the wrong answer. Okay, I want us to understand that's the wrong answer, because here we have to remember something. Why do we do something? And hopefully it's because we're pointing pointing people to God. Hopefully, it's because we're pointing people to a changed relationship through a Savior named Jesus. Now, basically, what we see here that Jeroboam and all of Israel came and spoke to Rehoboam, and the Rehoboam came back. And what did he say? We're going to keep the status quo. We're going to go back. Not just the status quo, we're going to make it harder. We're going to make it harder. When I was at Indiana State, I had to take I can't remember what class it was. I just know I ended up in this second year business class that you couldn't take unless you had the first year business class that I didn't have. But somehow I got stuck in that class for a whole 20 minutes. Thank goodness the professor called me out and said, "Yes, sir, I'm out of here." Why? I had no clue. I had no clue. And I want to encourage all of us tonight. How do we grow up? How do we get to a point where we can have from the younger input and the older input so that we can work together to be who God wants us to be? That's by trusting God with those decisions and putting people in positions that we know God is going to use through that position. Not simply because we like them. Not simply because they've been here for 30 years. Or can't we, and conversely, we can't say, well, they haven't been here long enough. Because I'm going to tell you what happens when you tell somebody they haven't been here long enough. They're gone, and they won't be here at all. You see, we need to make sure, as God's people, as God's church, that we're following what His Word says. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? It's hard. I wish it was simple, don't you, Terry? I wish it was so simple. And we just wake up and we got it all figured out, we're good to go. But unfortunately for us, it doesn't work that way. But I want us to see here that the key to all of it is that last one there are the people we place in positions around us in our personal lives and around us in the church. Are they people who will point you and our church to God and His Word? Because if they're not, they should not be in that position. I didn't say they can't be your friends, but don't go ask the world for godly input because you're not going to get it. And as we think about the things in our life, wouldn't you agree it'd be awesome if the world around us got godly input? You know, not people running around with protest signs in their hand and throwing fire bombs into windows and saying, "I love Jesus." Not that kind of an input. I'm going to tell you something. There's a lot of people justifying their behavior based upon their beliefs, and it's scary. You see, we need to make sure that we put people in positions in our churches and in our lives who love the Lord. And understand something, there's a difference between loving the Lord and being in a church forever. We're making it really clear. There's a difference between the two. And sometimes we think they're synonymous, but they're not. And you see, He wants us to be a church that loves Him. And in fact, He says, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God what? With all thine heart, all thy soul, and all thy mind." And these words, I command thee this day, where should they supposed to be? In our heart. And I want to encourage all of us, let's let God have control of our life. You guys have to figure out what I've learned over the last 11 weeks. I want you to pay a lot closer attention to what I'm trying to share. You see, this is God's church, and it's time to give it back to Him. If we want to see the church spread and take off, it's got to have more than just miracle grow. It's got to have God at its root. Not us, but God. And what I know from my Bible, things, more than two, but these two things. Number one, if we don't place God first in His church and in our lives, we'll be just like Israel. But the second thing we can do, if we allow God at His proper place in our lives, we'll be just like Israel. Because you see, when they had God in the proper place, Brother Rick, what were they doing? Prospering. And when they weren't, guess where they ended up? They were gone. They were carried off into captivity. We ended up getting the Samaritans because of captivity being taken off. We ended up having the hatred that I talked about this morning. You see, it's that important for our lives. It's that important for the growth of God's kingdom and God's church, not just in our church, but in every church. Far too often we get ourselves in the way. And we forget, you know what? Let's seek out the right advice. Seek it out. Because God wants us to have that in our lives. And church, let us never settle for anything. Don't ever settle for anything. Because when we settle for something, it usually means we're going to pay for it. We're going to regret settling. Let's make sure that we say, God, you know what you want us to do, we're going to do it. God, however you want us to do it, we'll do it. That's who He is. That's who He is. He's never called us to mediocrity. He's called us to greatness. God never calls us to being half. He's called us to be full. God has never called us just to be partially made whole. He has called us to be completely made whole. And we can only do that. This whole scenario here in 2 Chronicles, could it have been changed around? You betcha. In fact, very simply could have been turned around. But chose not to. How many of you would say you're stubborn? Do you want to raise your hand? I'm not stubborn. I gave it all away to my kids. Just so you know. But one of the things here that we find with this whole story, this recount of history, and a lot of I'm not listening to you. And I think we all can probably relate to those things. I want to encourage every one of us, you know what? Make sure when we do things in our lives and in our church that we do so with wise decisions. So that we know that that's what God wants us to do. Flying by the seat of our pants is difficult. In fact, it's downright dangerous. And I want to encourage us, let's trust God with all that we do. And say, God, you know what? We're ready. We're ready. The Bible tells us very simply this: He is ready to open up the floodgates of heaven. All we got to do is our heart. All we got to do. Just like in any other relationship. Both people have to give and take. And the same thing with God. Remember, there is no relationship with God if you don't know Jesus. Do you know Him tonight? Maybe you struggle. And I know Him as my Lord and Savior, but I try to get Him on. They often have to make choices. They often have to make choices of who they were going to follow. And I hope that you say, I'm going to follow Jesus tonight. And that, I'm going to work hard putting wise counsel into my life. And that our church will say, we're going to put wise counsel into our life as we trust God as we serve Him. That's what I want us to see in our lives. I hope that's what you want to see here. Brother Don, would you come?